Hey everyone, welcome to the Unit 2 Animals and Habitats Overview for the K for Me curriculum. During this time together, we're going to talk about what's new and important about this curriculum, what's exciting about this unit, and some things you might expect as we move into this second unit of study. For those of you who I have not had the pleasure of meeting yet, my name is Melissa, and I am a consultant with the Boston Public Schools, and very fortunate to be collaborating with the Maine Department of Ed. I was a program developer in the Boston Public Schools several years ago, and moved back to California about maybe 5 years back, and still maintained connections with the Boston Public Schools, especially with this curriculum, because I love it so much, as you all know, and just really enjoy the learning that comes out of this way of teaching. You should know that if you have any questions whatsoever or want to talk through something, please don't hesitate to contact me. And if you don't have my email, it's right here for you. So, as you know, the K for Me curriculum is built through 4 units of study. And right now you are probably finishing up our community. And I am hopeful that you not only found it to be enjoyable, but found yourself immersed in a space where you were using the curriculum as an entry point to build a community in your classroom. We're moving on to Unit 2, Animals and Habitats. And here we are building on what you have already created and started in your classroom community. We're moving from a classroom community to learning about an animal community and what that looks like and sounds like. And as we move through this study, we will think about what it means to be a part of this community, and what it means to be humans in connection with this community. So it's a very interesting study to dive into. After this unit, we will move into Unit 3, Construction. And we're going to move into thinking about what construction means in different ways, and beyond just bulldozers and excavators. And the last unit of study will be our Earth, and we will kind of see how this 4th unit of study circles back to our community. In thinking about not just a space within our classroom, not just a space within our town, but a space on our planet. What does it mean to be a piece of a larger community as advocates for our Earth? So let's come back to Unit 2, Animals and Habitats. So as you know, each unit is built off of big ideas, which we used to be called enduring understandings, and essential questions, big questions. And when we thought about this unit, we really wanted to give time and space for children to explore animals that might be interesting to them. And animals where there might be a lot of questions, and animals in which we can connect with, the children might feel some connection to. So one of the big ideas is that animals are a part of communities themselves, right? You probably are still thinking about your routines. Children are finally feeling confident in knowing what to expect when they walk into your classroom. And they've started to build really strong friendships, relationships with you. And so we want to kind of think back to this, and now think about how animals are part of communities as well. How do we think about animals as um, uh, beings who also have rules and routines, who also have very important characteristics about them that make them special in their community. We move into thinking about what animals need, just like we need, especially what we need in terms of being successful in our classroom communities. So animals need food, they need water, they need air, similarly to us. But their needs are very specific, and children will have an opportunity to really think about this and make comparisons to themselves. Another big idea is that all animals grow and change over time. We think about why it's important, life cycles, how animals change and why they change. What's the significance of an animal going through these changes, and what that does to their community. One really important piece and takeaway for children in this unit is thinking about us in relation to these animals. One of the ways in which we want children to think about themselves is that we children have a voice and can educate and act as stewards and protectors and even advocates. Once children feel like they have a good, solid knowledge base about these animals, they really feel like they have the power to advocate for them, right? And so we'll talk more about that in the writing. We'll talk more about that as we go on. And the text really give us an entry point to thinking about humans as protectors. The last big idea of this unit, which is about information and how we as people organize and gather information and how we analyze that information. So this big idea is really important because we want children to understand that there is a whole lot of information out here about animals, about anything really. And we have to be able to take charge in finding out this information. We want children to know that they have the power to find out things, ask questions, analyze, be wrong about things, find the right answer, and learn on their own. We learn that scientists do that. We learn that we as protectors have to be able to do that, to learn more about the environments around us. The unit, there are several big questions for the unit, for this animals and habitats unit. And the one unit question that we will revisit and revisit and revisit at the end of each week is this: how do animals form communities, work together, and use and adapt to their environments? And how is this similar to and different from what people do? Right. So with these unit questions, we are asking children to really thoughtfully, meaningfully come back to this question and revisit it. We want these questions to be written down on chart paper, right? And give children an opportunity to think about the books that they've read, the experiences and conversations they've had during centers, during stations, during writing, and what kinds of knowledge they can circle back to address this unit question. It's a big question, right? And there are so many pieces to the question. And so as we go through the unit, we will come back each week to revisit, and we really want children to think on their own about what pieces they can bring back to address this unit question. So you are finishing up Unit 1, and we want to think about, okay, now you have a unit under your belt. What's going to be different in animals and habitats? What's going to be different about the format, and what can I expect? So this unit is much longer than our community, than the first unit. And it's 10 weeks, which is about 4 weeks longer than the first unit, about a month longer than the first unit. So this unit is going to take you probably through the holiday breaks, right? And right into January, and maybe even close to February. Again, as I was hoping that you would give yourself grace for in Unit 1, I want to provide the same type of advice for you in this unit. It's a long unit, purposefully, and we really want you to have permission to take it slow, pause when children are having a great time, skip over things if children are not as interested, and allow yourself to make connections to the context that you're in. Within this unit, you'll be diving into 3 smaller studies. And again, purposeful for which organisms we're going to be really looking at. So we're going to start off the unit with fish and frogs. This first sub-study, we're really going to take time to think about the life cycle. So we start out with frogs, the life cycle of a frog. And we give children an opportunity to look at texts about frogs and really think about what a life cycle means. We get into fish quickly after that. And very specifically, the fish in which we study are salmon. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through this. But we really want children to have an opportunity to think about fish, as a category of animal. But at the same time, we want children to dive deeper into one specific kind of fish. We get into owls as the second sub-study. This is really exciting, and I'm gonna show you a few examples soon, because owls are such an interesting organism for children in many different kinds of ways. We will see that some children with owls know that owls make the hoo hoo sound, but what else? Right? What else do we know about owls, and what makes them so interesting? What kind of habitats do they live in? The last study, which is we're going to take time to learn about wolves. And again, a purposeful choice in that we chose wolves because how cool are they? And the idea that wolves are an animal that it is really mysterious. And so we give children an opportunity to think about wolves. And we want really children to think about wolves in not such a fantastical kind of way, right? We're so used to wolves being a villain, right? And in fact, we're going to the Three Little Pigs books will be what we lead off the next unit with. We want children to sort of think about wolves also in a factual kind of way, right? The real wolves, and what's so amazing about them. What else is different in this unit? Here is where we get into exposing children deeply into the two kinds of texts, fiction and nonfiction. I know, and we were in person. I might be looking around the room and seeing a reaction to nonfiction texts. Because some kindergarten teachers are excited about the idea of nonfiction texts and others are not. I knew I was not one of them. When I first picked up this curriculum, I was pretty intimidated by the length, the idea of how much text nonfiction books have. That fiction books have. And so we want children to have exposure to these kinds of books and be able to really think about what this means for them. What else is different in this unit? There is going to be, in addition to the fiction and nonfiction spread, some more types of texts, and that's poems. And so you'll see, a sprinkle of poems in the read aloud block. And what's interesting about these texts is we're going to think about purpose. We're going to think about imagery. We're going to think about, what a poem does. What's the difference between reading a poem and reading a story? And children will have exposure to these poems in a different kind of way than we would in shared reading. So that's an exciting piece to this Animals and Habitats unit. So I want to really take some time to show you an example of this sub-study that I'm referring to. And we're going to just take a minute to think about owls. And I want to sort of show you a little bit about how it unfolds in this unit, and take a look at some center activities, because this is where it gets really interesting, right? So in each of the sub-studies, you'll find books that are about that topic, both fiction and nonfiction, right? And so with the fictional tale here, with owls, we get this beautiful text, Owl Moon. And you will see I really truly enjoy it for both the illustrations and the text itself. It's written beautifully, but it tells us a story of a girl and her father who go out owling, looking for owls. An experience that is so interesting and draws children in. Right, so we will see this fictional tale, and then this is posed right next to Owls by Gail Gibbons. Gail Gibbons is an author that we will see again, and actually twice in this unit, and then a couple more times as the year will progress. But this text by Gail Gibbons will give us a lot of information about owls. And so, we're posing these two books together side by side, and purposefully, as we think about the imaginative, the fictional, the fantastical stories that animals are in, owls, we really want to also think about some facts. What can we learn about owls? As we approach this unit, the idea of research is going to be key. And what I also want to highlight is that you as the educator are not expected to be an expert in owls. Maybe some of you are, but it's not a requirement. And what's going to be so amazing is that you get to learn about owls alongside the children, if you don't already know everything about owls. And when we think about researchers, we think about asking questions. Put yourself in that category as well. We're all going to be researchers in this unit. We're going to research owls. We're going to research wolves and learn side by side together. We're going to use these two texts, owls and white owl, barn owl, to really ask questions and understand more about these animals. White owl, barn owl is another text that offers a story, but it's going to be interesting because there are some factual pieces in this text as well. So as we get into the work, right, of our children for this unit, what we want to see unfold is that children are going to express their understandings, their misconceptions, their wonderings, all in different kinds of ways. And our centers are going to be the modality in which children are experiencing this, right? So for each of the organisms, frogs, fish, salmon, owls, and wolves, we're going to ask them to create habitats. And so when we think about a habitat for owls, what does that look like? And again, we don't want to offer them answers, or at least all the answers, right? We're facilitating this conversation. So we are offering a space for children to create a habitat for owls on their own in dramatization. So here you could see a classroom community who has created trees, right, in different kinds of ways. Looks like cut paper. And we want children to experience this. We want children to find out the information. So we're going to offer them resources for them to do this. And of course, our books are going to be a huge source of information for them. Yeah, look at those kids. They are diving into owl pellets. And so I always, every time I see this kind of learning happening, I think about how I wasn't quite sure what an owl pellet was when I first started this curriculum, and learned that owls cough up things that they cannot digest, and that is an owl pellet, and I thought it was something else. But these things are quite interesting for children to explore. So you'll want to order these for them, and we'll talk more about materials in a little bit. But you'll find some children will love this activity, and again, some children will probably watch from the side, and that's okay. These children are into it. They have gloves, they've got the tweezers going on, and they are digging into the owl pellet and trying to pull out some of what the owl, learn about what this owl digested, or actually did not digest, what this owl ingested, and try to figure out what kind of prey this owl had. So this is the type of learning in which children are going to take their time, ask a lot of questions, and I think that there's going to be a lot of inquiry happening in terms of hypothesizing what this owl chased and had. Of course, we're going to ask children to create owls. You know, what I find to be so just extraordinary about asking children to create um, an animal like this is that we are really learning about what children know and what children understand about these animals. We can see that they made sure that the owls had some sort of ears for that because, hey, they have very good hearing. It's a very important feature, survival feature for them, and these children understood that. You know, that's that, and we will see all the kinds of things that children are grabbing and gravitating to. We're going to ask children to create nonfiction texts, and we're going to ask them to think about what it is that they know about owls. And so this is an example of how a child wanted to express that he knows that owls have sharp talons, right? And so we're going to ask them to explain the why. Why do they have sharp talons? And Brandon here, quite the artist and also becoming an expert on owls. So I mentioned earlier the, you know, one of the defining features about this unit is fiction and nonfiction text. So we will see, you know, in each of the studies, putting together side by side. Fish is Fish is a text by Leo Leone, and if you haven't read it yet, you'll see that it's about two different animals, a fish and a frog, right? Very, very fitting for our study, who have very different perspectives about things because they live in different habitats. And so, you know, here we are, and then we're putting that right next to, offering that right next to the life cycle of a salmon. Children will become very familiar with the features of a nonfiction text, the purpose of a nonfiction text, and the read is so different, right? We're comparing here two authors that had different purposes for writing these books. When we learn about the life cycle of a salmon, the children will time and time again come to this book, come to the Bobby Kalman book, and use this as a resource of information. With Fish is Fish, we cannot do that. We're not able to do the same type of research as we would with salmon. Children are going to spend a lot of time with this book. Actually, in fact, the read, I believe, is 5 reads in a row. And we're reading pieces of it. You know, if you have the book in front of you, you know it's a long book. And so we cannot possibly read it in one sitting. So we will take it in pieces and we will offer it to children as informational text, and really wanting children to take away the vocabulary, take away the information, take away that this illustration of a life cycle has such different features than any image you will find in Leo Leone's book. So lean into this, and we will see children really becoming experts right before our eyes. What's different in stations this unit? We will see, I wanted to just point out that stations probably for you is following your literacy, your explicit literacy program. And you're probably taking pieces of the station's activities offered here and catering them to the scope and sequence of your literacy program. What's going to be different in stations from now, this unit, Unit 2, Unit 3, and also Unit 4, is that you'll find mid and end of unit assessments And for this unit, the 10-week long unit, you'll find a mid-unit assessment in week 5, and then an end of unit assessment in week 10. And the assessments will simply be content driven and simply asking children to show their understanding. So here in the end of unit assessment, children will be asked the question, how do wolves grow and change? And so during stations, we will ask them this prompt, we'll provide them with a piece of paper and ask them to either draw their understanding, write their understanding. They could also tell an adult about their understanding if drawing is something that at this point in time is not their comfort level. We want to offer an assessment where we are thinking about, are the children getting the content that we need them to get? And we want them to be able to express this understanding. You will find there is a rubric that you can use as a resource and talk with your colleagues, if you have them, about these unit assessments, because this will help drive the mid-unit assessment, especially will help drive the instruction and will also tell you about the learning that's happening in front of you. What else is different about this unit and other units to come is that there is some sort of culminating event at the end of the unit. And so here is in Unit 2, Animals and Habitats, is a showcase of learning. And we are inviting you to really think about this showcase of learning at the beginning of the unit because it's a culminating experience. And the actual showcase at the very end of the unit is just as important as the process in collecting and preparing for the showcase. So what we're offering and inviting you to do is to host an event in week 10 or after, inviting an audience, whether that's families, whether that's your administrators, whether that's the other classroom, whether that's the second grade class, whether that's someone on Zoom if you need to be, whether that's families on Zoom if you need to be. We're asking you to hold an event and where you showcase the type of learning that happened in this unit, right? This can be recorded if you need it to be because of COVID, but it's some sort of honoring of the experiences that happened in the unit. So it's an opportunity to really think about and take a snapshot of the unit, right? But what is interesting, and I think even more important about this, is that we are really wanting you and the children to curate the artifacts. So meaning, like just as a curator at a museum would, right? We want there to be meaningful selections throughout the unit that we are showcasing. Okay, so what I'm thinking about is moving away from everybody sharing their frog life cycle image that they drew, moving away from everyone having to show their owl beautiful stuff creations. But instead, what the hope is that each child is represented in this showcase, but they do not have to be showing the same thing. Okay, so keep that in mind. Really thinking about asking children what's meaningful to them. What are they most proud of? What is it that was the most interesting part of this unit to them? and showcasing that. What was the most, what was a huge aha moment for them? What do you feel like you are an expert in? And if you ask that of all of your children, they will all say different things. So find a box. And in week one, literally in week one, when you introduce frogs, start this process of collecting work. Throw in that box some work you're proud of. Take pictures of the frog structures that the children build. Take pictures of when children are acting out the life cycle of a frog and what that looks like. Videotape that and bookmark that. Start collecting some amazing work and start collecting some amazing processes of work. Don't feel pressure to save everything. Again, this is curating, right? We don't need everything. We just need pieces. Around week 6, week 5, week 6, week 7, schedule a date if you're going to have something in, an actual event and not a recorded one. Or if you're going to have a recorded one, schedule when you're going to do that. And, coordinate with other classrooms if you have them, coordinate with an audience. If you really want your principal to come, invite him or her early on. So they have it in their books. In the last weeks of the unit, here is where the really, really important piece comes. Sit down with the children and talk about what they want to share. Emphasize that we are sharing our experiences and our learnings, and we're going to pick what we are most proud of and have them be the drivers of this. Have them be the ones to advocate for what's important for them, and see where it takes you. Writing in Unit 2. So, there was a little bit of revision from the previous year, both from feedback from last year and also from some collaborating writers from this year. So shout out to those teachers who contributed to these writing revisions. In the first couple of weeks of this unit, you're going to be finishing up personal recount, which you had started in Unit 1, right? So this is in the first 2 weeks, you are finalizing these pieces, you are providing feedback, revising and publishing, right? These personal recounts that the children are writing. In weeks 3 to 6, we're introducing a new genre, and that's the genre of report. And here, the purpose is to organize information about a topic. We are, so fortunate to be already reading so many mentor texts. So in writing the sheet in weeks 3 to 6, we will be looking at texts that you're already reading: The Life Cycle of a Salmon, Owls and Wolves by Gail Gibbons, and really thinking about how this author, an expert in the field, how this author is organizing information. And you will deconstruct that and piece together that information. Children will be writing in third person, right? And you will be joint construction, constructing a report about frogs. And then in small groups, they're going to be doing some research and writing their own reports. In weeks 7 through 10, we're going to get into explanation. An explanation writing can take on, in the real world, take on so many different forms. Here in K for Me, we're thinking about scientific explanations to explain something. Here in the last weeks of the unit, The children are going to take some time to think about a life cycle, and again, using some of the mentor text. And when we do this, we're going to make that life cycle and add that back into the report books that they created in the previous weeks. In weeks 7 through 10, children will be exploring nouns and verbs and the difference between the two. They'll be collecting them and finding them and writing them. So writing unfolds in ways that make sense to them, because not only are we reading these mentor texts, children are going to be writing with the same type of purposes. So materials and resources. I wanted to just pull out and make some recommendations for what you might need in this unit. So you want to think about ordering those owl pellets, right? And do that early on if you can, and because they need time to arrive. I would personally, if you could, get one per child. But I know that, the way funding works, that may not be possible. If you cannot get one per child, one per pair or one per small group is fine too. Not everyone's going to actually touch the owl pellets, or at least in my experience, you never know. But I've seen most classes where children just want to watch another child dissect it. And so, you might just need one per pair of children or one per small group, but order them early. What's going similarly to the first unit of study, my recommendation would be for you to, if you're not already familiar with, for you to investigate these organisms that we're studying, or investigate what might be local to your context. What kinds of owls might you find locally? What kinds of wool, where might you find some wolves closest to you? Can you pull up a webcam where you are watching some wolves, in real time? So some of you might have access, to these resources very easily. So share them if you do, and share them if you find a good website. For the STEM investigation in this unit, we will be giving our little scientists an opportunity to think about the structures of our human body, and then comparing that to a structure of a fish. And so if you have one in your classroom, great. We'll give our little scientists a live fish to look at. But if you don't, search for one maybe in your school campus. Maybe a teacher might have one that you could borrow, or the office. But if you don't have one, there are many websites that might offer a live feed of a fish, that you could turn on your iPad or phone or laptop for children to see. Children will be doing a lot of habitat creating. So my recommendation would be to start gathering some paper and felt for habitat creations, or things that might be appropriate for these habitats. So if you're looking for paper or felt, we might want to look for greens and browns and grays and blues, for children to make trees and woods and caves for wolves. But I've also seen teachers gather things like newspaper that they paint, or packaging that comes with your Amazon boxes, and save those to create trees. Butcher paper, things like that, that children might use. If you can, try to avoid buying stuff, but instead look around, instead ask around, instead save things. And remember that beautiful stuff is going to be and will be a huge material for us in now and in the units to come. So especially for this unit, try to find natural materials, go on when you go on those walks, take a bag with you and collect those sticks, collect those rocks, take them with you, and because it will be nice to offer them for children to build nests, to build habitats. Children love those to use pebbles and rocks and those aquarium rocks when they build habitats for salmon. So again, don't go buying stuff, just look around, gather, ask around, send home those beautiful stuff, letters again, so that we can have these stocked up for our kids when the time comes. So in conclusion, I want to leave you with this quote by Kurt Lewin. And he says that learning is more effective when it is an active rather than passive process. I think that all of us are living this quote as we are teaching this curriculum. There are children who will amaze us with the active process of discovery, with the active process of wondering and asking questions, with the active process of creating. Look at this frog that a child created. Look how beautiful and interesting it is, but really also how accurate it is. And the last photo of just bringing us back to the joy and wonderment that children have. These children created a wolf, and it's almost life-size. So we want children to engage in this type of learning, the active learning, and we as facilitators are offering this space for them to do so. So thank you so much for engaging with me today. And please, please, please do not hesitate if you have questions or even want to share something or talk through something. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will be in connection very soon. Thank you.